In a tense courtroom, a farewell transforms into a challenge filled with mysteries. A man marked by war struggles to protect his loyal companion, a symbol of courage and alliance. Heightened instincts awaken hidden secrets, foreshadowing dangers. Beyond human comprehension, amidst the chaos, the revealed mysteries leave everyone shocked. Before becoming emotional with this tale of suspense and determination, subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories. The military courtroom was packed that Thursday morning. Sergeant Jack Miller, in his wheelchair, nervously adjusted the medals on his uniform while waiting for the hearing to begin. At his side, Shadow, a black German shepherd with attentive eyes, maintained a vigilant posture as if still on the battlefield. The case to be judged that day went far beyond a simple military transfer. For Jack, it meant the possible separation from his most loyal companion, the one who kept him alive during the worst moments of his military career. Shadow wasn't just a war dog. He was his guardian, confidant, and the reason he still found strength to move forward after the accident that confined him to a wheelchair. "All rise for the entrance of Colonel Walter Hammond," announced the court. "Officer." Silence took over the room as the magistrate, a man with an austere posture and graying hair, took his place at the main table. Jack felt a tightness in his chest when the first documents began to be read. The words sounded like merciless sentences, considering the time of service rendered, property of the state, need for reallocation. Each phrase was a stab in his heart. That's when something unusual happened. Shadow, until then well-behaved, began to bark intensely and in a directed manner, his eyes fixed on a specific point in the courtroom near the side entrance. The animal's behavior caught the attention of everyone present, including Colonel Hammond, who interrupted the reading of the documents. "Control your dog, Sergeant," ordered the colonel. But there was something different in the air. Shadow didn't usually act like this without reason. Jack knew this behavior well. It was the same that had saved his life and that of his entire unit several times during missions. From the shadows of the side corridor emerged a figure Jack never expected to see again. Wearing a dark overcoat and carrying a small briefcase, the man crossed the courtroom with firm steps. It was Dr. Thomas Weber, the German scientist who had trained Shadow and other dogs in the special military program years ago. "I ask forgiveness for the interruption." "Your Honor," said Weber with his characteristic accent, "but I need to make an urgent intervention in this case." His eyes met Jack's, and a chill ran down the ex-soldier's spine. That reunion didn't seem to be a coincidence. Colonel Hammond, visibly annoyed by the interruption, questioned, "And you are?" "Dr. Thomas Weber, developer of the elite canine program of the Special Forces, and I have crucial information about the dog in question that could completely change the course of this hearing." Murmuring took over the courtroom. Jack watched attentively as Weber opened his briefcase and removed an old folder yellowed by time. Shadow remained restless, his barks now replaced by a low and constant growl. "This dog," continued Weber, "is not just an animal trained for combat. He is part of an experimental program that goes far beyond what anyone in this room can imagine." Jack felt his heart accelerate. During all the years of partnership with Shadow, he had always suspected there was something different about his companion. The way the dog perceived danger, how he communicated, how he understood complex situations. Now the pieces were starting to fit together. Weber approached Jack and Shadow, ignoring the protests of the security officers. The dog intensified his growl, positioning himself between the scientist and his human partner. "I see he still remembers me," Weber commented with an enigmatic smile. "And I also see that the bond between you is exactly what I expected to develop." Colonel Hammond struck his gavel, demanding order in the room. "Dr. Weber, if you have something relevant to present, do so in an appropriate manner." "With all due respect, Your Honor," replied Weber, "what I have to reveal goes far beyond documents and military protocols. We are talking about a project that began 2 decades ago in the Bavarian mountains, and that could completely change our understanding of animal intelligence and the connection between man and dog." Jack looked at Shadow, who kept his eyes fixed on Weber. At that moment, all the questions he had kept for years about his canine partner seemed about to be answered. But something in the German scientist's tone of voice and in Shadow's reaction made him apprehensive. The courtroom, which minutes before seemed just another bureaucratic battle for the custody of a military dog, was transforming into the stage for revelations that no one was prepared to hear. And Jack, in his wheelchair, firmly held Shadow's leash, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story than he could imagine. The silence that followed Dr. Weber's words was almost palpable. All eyes in the courtroom alternated between the German scientist, Sergeant Jack, and Shadow, who remained in an alert position. Colonel Hammond, recovering from the initial shock, was the first to break the silence. "Dr. Weber, you have exactly 5 minutes to explain the relevance of this information to the case at hand. Otherwise, I will be forced to ask for your removal from the premises." Weber nodded, an enigmatic gleam in his eyes. "It all started in 2005, in secret facilities in Berchtesgaden in the Bavarian Alps. Our goal was to create a new generation of military dogs, capable not only of detecting threats, but of understanding them and communicating them more efficiently." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He vaguely remembered rumors about an ultra-secret program involving dogs, but he always thought they were just barrack stories. Weber continued, "We used advanced techniques of genetic engineering and cognitive training. The result was a lineage of dogs with capabilities that border on the supernatural. Shadow," he pointed to the animal beside Jack, "is one of the last specimens of that program." A murmur of disbelief ran through the room. Jack looked at Shadow, who kept his eyes fixed on Weber as if understanding every word. "I'm talking about animals capable of predicting future events, detecting lies just by the variation in the human voice, and even establishing a rudimentary form of telepathic communication with their human partners," explained Weber, his voice laden with pride and a hint of apprehension. Colonel Hammond interrupted. "Dr. Weber, this sounds like science fiction. Do you have any concrete proof of these claims?" Weber smiled, taking a small device from his briefcase. "Actually, I do. This device is capable of measuring the brain waves emitted by Shadow. With your permission, I would like to make a demonstration." Before the colonel could respond, Shadow began to bark furiously, jumping in front of Jack as if wanting to protect him. Chaos ensued in the room, with security officers advancing and people shouting. "Step back!" shouted Jack, his voice rising above the tumult. "He's trying to tell us something." At that moment, a tremor shook the building, lights flickered, and the sound of breaking glass echoed through the corridors. Shadow continued barking, now pointing with his muzzle toward the emergency exit. "Evacuate the building," ordered Colonel Hammond, his authoritative voice cutting through the general panic. Jack, with Shadow's help, began to maneuver his wheelchair toward the exit. Weber ran to help him, but was detained by 2 security officers. "Don't you understand?" shouted the German scientist as he was dragged away. "Shadow predicted this. He's trying to save all of us." As people rushed out of the courtroom, Jack and Shadow found themselves trapped amid the chaos. The ex-soldier struggled to move his chair through the debris that was beginning to fall from the ceiling. "Go, Shadow!" shouted Jack, fearing for his partner's life. "Save yourself!" But the dog refused to leave his side. With surprising strength, Shadow grabbed the sleeve of Jack's uniform with his teeth and began to pull, helping him navigate through the obstacles. As they slowly moved toward the exit, Jack couldn't help but think about Weber's words. Could it be possible that Shadow had really predicted the danger? And what else was his faithful companion capable of? The sound of sirens filled the air when they finally managed to exit the building. Paramedics and firefighters ran from one side to the other, attending to the injured and fighting small fire outbreaks. Jack looked at Shadow, who was now sitting by his side, vigilant as always. "What are you really, my friend?" he whispered, stroking the animal's head. At that moment, his eyes met Weber's, who was being attended to by paramedics a few meters away. The German scientist made a subtle gesture, indicating that their conversation was not yet over. As the dust settled and the reality of what had just happened began to establish itself, Jack realized that his fight to keep Shadow by his side had transformed into something much bigger. Now he was not only fighting against military bureaucracy, but also diving into a world of scientific secrets and inexplicable canine abilities. What had begun as a simple transfer hearing had transformed into the prelude to an adventure that promised to challenge everything Jack believed he knew about his four-legged partner and about himself. The chaos that followed the incident at the courthouse lasted for hours. Jack and Shadow were taken to a temporary shelter set up by military authorities in a nearby gymnasium. The place was filled with disoriented people, some injured, others in shock. Doctors and nurses ran from one side to another, providing first aid. Jack observed everything with a mixture of concern and incredulity. Shadow remained by his side, alert, as if still expecting some imminent danger. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the buzz of the environment. "Sergeant Miller." It was Lieutenant Sarah Brooks, a young officer Jack knew from his training days. She approached quickly with a clipboard in hand and a serious expression on her face. "Jack, glad to see you're okay," she said, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "I need you to come with me immediately. Superior orders." Jack frowned. "What's going on, Sarah? We barely got out of a disaster and they're already giving orders." Sarah looked nervously around before responding in a low voice. "It's about Dr. Weber and, well, about Shadow. High Command wants to talk to you now." A chill ran down Jack's spine. He knew that Weber's revelations in court would not go unnoticed, but he did not expect such a quick reaction. "And Shadow?" he asked, placing his hand protectively on the dog's head. "He comes with us," replied Sarah, already moving to push Jack's wheelchair. "In fact, he is a fundamental part of this conversation." As they were guided out of the gymnasium, Jack noticed the discreet but unmistakable presence of security agents surrounding them. Something big was happening, and he was at the center of it all. They were taken to an adjacent building, apparently untouched by the tremor. In the elevator, Sarah inserted a special card and entered a code, taking them to an underground floor that Jack didn't even know existed. The doors opened to reveal a high-tech command center. Huge screens displayed maps, graphs, and live video feeds. In the center of the room, around a holographic table, were gathered some of the highest-ranking military officers in the country. "Sergeant Miller," greeted General Robert Taylor, a middle-aged man with penetrating eyes. "Welcome to the Special Canine Operations Center, or SCOC, a place that until a few hours ago you shouldn't know existed." Jack felt Shadow tense up beside him. The dog seemed to recognize the place, or at least sense its importance. "General, with all due respect, what's going on here?" asked Jack, his voice firm despite his internal confusion. General Taylor made a gesture, and the screens around changed, showing images of military facilities, laboratories, and dogs. Dozens of dogs in different stages of training. "Sergeant, what you saw and heard today in court is just the tip of the iceberg," the general began. "Project Sentinel, of which Shadow is a part, is the most advanced and secret military program ever developed on American soil." Jack looked at Shadow, who kept his eyes fixed on the screens, as if analyzing the information. "But," Jack hesitated, "I thought Shadow was part of a German program. Dr. Weber," interrupted a familiar voice, "didn't tell the whole truth." Everyone turned to see Thomas Weber himself entering the room, escorted by two officers. He looked tired, but his eyes shone with an almost feverish intensity. "The program began in Germany, yes," continued Weber, "but it was quickly internationalized. The United States, Israel, several countries participated, each contributing unique expertise." General Taylor nodded. "The U.S. stood out in the area of man-dog communication, and Shadow is our greatest success so far." Jack felt his head spin with all this information. But why tell me all this now? Why all this secrecy and suddenly this openness? That's when one of the screens changed, showing satellite images of a mountainous region. "Because," said the general, his voice grave, "we believe that today's tremor was not an accident, and Shadow may be our only hope of preventing the next attack." At that moment, Shadow emitted a low whine, almost as if confirming the general's words. Jack looked at his canine partner, realizing that he was about to dive into much deeper and more dangerous waters than he had ever imagined. "What exactly do you want us to do?" asked Jack, his voice mixing determination and apprehension. The general exchanged glances with Weber before responding. "We want you and Shadow to lead a mission. A mission to save not only the country, but potentially the entire world. The words hung in the air, heavy and laden with meaning. Jack felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. He looked at Shadow, seeking some kind of confirmation, of assurance. The dog returned the look, his intelligent eyes seeming to say, "We're in this together, partner." And so, amid the chaos of a day that had begun as a simple transfer hearing, Jack and Shadow found themselves on the threshold of a journey that would test not only their abilities, but also the limits of what they believed possible in the relationship between men and dogs. The silence that followed General Taylor's words was broken by the soft sound of fingers touching a keyboard. A middle-aged woman, wearing a white lab coat over her military uniform, approached the holographic table. "Let me introduce Dr. Emily Parker, our lead scientist on Project Sentinel," said the general. Emily nodded briefly before beginning her explanation. "Sergeant Miller, what you need to understand is that Shadow is not just an exceptionally trained dog. He is the result of years of research in advanced genetics and neurotechnology. Images of DNA sequences and complex brain mappings appeared on the screens around them. Jack watched, fascinated and a little frightened. "Simplifying," continued Emily, "Shadow possesses abilities that go far beyond common human understanding. He can detect imperceptible seismic changes, predict weather patterns, and most importantly, can establish a neural connection with his human partner." Jack looked at Shadow, who kept his eyes fixed on him, as if wanting to confirm the scientist's words. "Neural connection? You mean telepathy?" Emily smiled slightly. "Not exactly telepathy, but something close. With proper training, you and Shadow will be able to share sensations, emotions, and even fragments of thoughts." Dr. Weber intervened. "That's why the bond between you is so crucial. Shadow is not a tool that anyone can use. He needs someone with whom he has a deep bond." Jack felt the weight of responsibility grow even more. "And what exactly is the mission you want us for?" General Taylor touched the holographic table, bringing up a three-dimensional map of a mountainous region. "In recent months, we've detected abnormal seismic activities in this area. Initially, we thought it was natural, but now we believe someone is manipulating the tectonic plates," completed Emily. "If our suspicions are correct, they have the power to cause devastating earthquakes anywhere in the world." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "And how can Shadow and I help?" "Shadow can detect these seismic anomalies before they become dangerous," explained Weber. "And with your connection, you'll be able to interpret and communicate this information in real time." "But I'm in a wheelchair," Jack pointed out, frustration evident in his voice. "How can I lead a field mission?" That's when Sarah, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. "That's where I come in, Jack. I've been assigned to be your eyes and legs in the field. We'll work as a team, you, me, and Shadow." The general nodded. "The three of you, along with a small support team, will be infiltrated into the region. Your mission is to locate the source of these anomalies and, if possible, neutralize it." Jack looked at Shadow, then at Sarah, and finally back to the officers and scientists around the table. He knew he was about to embark on something much bigger than he had ever imagined. "When do we start?" he asked, his voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "Immediately," replied the general. "You have 48 hours to prepare. Dr. Parker and Dr. Weber will work with you and Shadow to accelerate the neural connection process. Lieutenant Brooks, you'll receive a full briefing on the mission and the necessary equipment." As everyone moved to begin preparations, Jack felt Shadow gently rest his head on his leg. Looking into the dog's eyes, he saw not only loyalty, but also a deep intelligence and an unwavering determination. "We're in this together, partner," murmured Jack, stroking Shadow's head. The dog emitted a slight bark, as if responding, "We always have been." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activities. Jack underwent a series of medical examinations and psychological tests, while Shadow went through physical and cognitive assessments. Dr. Parker guided them through intensive sessions of neural synchronization, a process that Jack found both fascinating and disconcerting. In one of these sessions, connected to Shadow by a series of electrodes, Jack experienced for the first time the sensation of seeing through the dog's eyes. It was an overwhelming experience, more vivid colors, intense smells, and a heightened perception of movement that almost made him dizzy. "This is incredible," gasped Jack, removing the electrodes after the session. Emily smiled. "And this is just the beginning. With time and practice, you'll be able to share not only sensations, but also intentions and even fragments of memory." Meanwhile, Sarah worked tirelessly on the logistical preparations for the mission. Maps, communication equipment, supplies, everything was being meticulously planned and checked. On the eve of departure, Jack found a moment of quietude with Shadow. Sitting together in the outdoor area of the complex, under a starry sky, man and dog seemed to contemplate the weight of the mission that lay ahead. "You know, Shadow," said Jack, his voice almost a whisper, "when I was injured in combat and confined to this chair, I thought my days of serving the country were over, but here we are, about to embark on the most important mission of our lives." Shadow looked at him, his eyes reflecting the stars above. Jack felt a wave of emotion, not just his own, but also from the dog. It was a mixture of apprehension, excitement, and above all, an unwavering confidence in each other. "No matter what happens," continued Jack, his hand resting on Shadow's neck, "we'll face it together, as we always have." At that moment, under the vast night sky, Jack felt that despite all the uncertainties and dangers that awaited them, there was one thing of which he could be absolutely certain. The bond between him and Shadow was stronger than any challenge they might face. With that certainty in his heart, they prepared for the next day, ready to dive into the unknown and face whatever fate had in store for them. The military helicopter sliced through the dawn sky, its noise muffled by cutting-edge technology. Inside the aircraft, Jack, Shadow, Sarah, and a small elite team prepared for disembarkation. The silence between them was palpable, laden with tension and expectation. 2 minutes to the insertion point," announced the pilot through the communication system. Jack adjusted the special equipment on his wheelchair, a modified and reinforced version, designed for difficult terrain. Beside him, Shadow was equipped with a tactical vest full of sensors and a small communication device attached to his collar. Sarah performed a final check on the equipment. "Remember," she said, her voice firm, "our primary objective is to locate the source of the seismic anomalies. Hostile engagement only as a last resort." The helicopter landed softly in a clearing hidden in the mountains. The team disembarked, quickly, disappearing into the shadows of the dense forest. Jack, with Sarah's help, maneuvered his chair over the uneven terrain, while Shadow led the way, his heightened senses scanning the environment. As they advanced through the forest, Jack began to feel something strange. It was as if he could sense the very pulse of the earth beneath them. He looked at Shadow and saw that the dog was also alert, his ears moving subtly. "Do you feel that?" Jack whispered to the group. Sarah frowned. "Feel what?" "It's like a vibration. Very subtle, but it's there," explained Jack, concentrating on the sensation. Suddenly, Shadow stopped, his ears up, and his body tense. Jack closed his eyes, trying to tune into what the dog was perceiving. That's when a mental image emerged in his mind, a network of underground tunnels pulsing with energy. "There's something beneath us," said Jack, opening his eyes. "A huge underground structure." Sarah quickly consulted a device on her wrist. "The sensors aren't picking up anything beyond the natural rock formation." "Trust me," insisted Jack. "Shadow is seeing, no, feeling this. And somehow I can too." The team exchanged apprehensive looks, but years of training had prepared them to trust in unusual situations. Following Jack and Shadow's indications, they began to search for a hidden entrance. It was Shadow who found it first. The dog began to dig furiously at a specific point, revealing a metal hatch camouflaged under layers of earth and vegetation. "Amazing," murmured one of the team members as they worked to open the hatch. The passage revealed a staircase that descended deeply into darkness. Tactical lights were activated, revealing a high-tech tunnel, in stark contrast to the wild nature above. How are we going to descend with the chair? Asked Sarah, concerned. Jack smiled, activating a mechanism on his chair. To everyone's surprise, it transformed into something resembling a compact exoskeleton. Courtesy of Dr. Parker, he explained, standing up with the help of the device. I can't run a marathon, but I can move around in tight spaces. Slowly, the group began to descend the stairs, with Shadow leading the way. As they advanced, the sensation of vibration that Jack felt became more intense. He could see that Shadow was also becoming increasingly alert. After what seemed like an eternity of descending, they reached a vast underground complex. Corridors extended in all directions, and the distant sound of heavy machinery echoed off the walls. "This is much bigger than we expected," whispered Sarah, consulting a holographic map on her wrist device. "We don't have information about any of this." Jack closed his eyes again, trying to tune into Shadow. Fragmented images passed through his mind. Huge machines, crystals pulsing with energy, and something else, a presence. Someone or something that seemed to be in control of all this. "That way," indicated Jack, pointing to one of the corridors. "The source of the energy is in that direction." As the group cautiously advanced, the tension was palpable. Each corner, each closed door could hide an unknown threat. Shadow stayed glued to Jack, his senses on maximum alert. Suddenly, an alarm echoed through the complex. Red lights began to flash, and the sound of security doors closing reverberated through the corridors. "We've been detected," shouted one of the team members. At that moment, panels in the walls opened, revealing advanced security robots. They moved with surprising agility, surrounding the group. "Protect Jack and Shadow," ordered Sarah, drawing her weapon. "They are our only chance to complete the mission." While the rest of the team engaged in combat with the robots, Jack felt an urgency coming from Shadow. The dog barked once sharply, and Jack understood instantly. "Sarah," he called, "Shadow found another passage. We have to go now." With Sarah covering their rear, Jack and Shadow launched themselves down a side corridor, leaving behind the sound of battle. They didn't know what awaited them ahead, but one thing was certain. They were about to discover the heart of this underground mystery, and perhaps with it the fate of the world above. Jack, Shadow, and Sarah advanced rapidly through the narrow corridor, the distant sound of battle echoing behind them. Jack's exoskeleton hummed softly as he moved, adapting to the uneven terrain. "Are you sure it's this way?" asked Sarah, her voice tense as she constantly checked to ensure they weren't being followed. Jack nodded, concentrating on the mental connection with Shadow. "It's like he can see through the walls. There's something huge just ahead, something pulsating." As they advanced, the corridor began to widen, leading into a colossal chamber. What they saw there left them speechless. In the center of the chamber stood a gigantic crystalline structure, pulsating with a bluish energy. Around it, dozens of scientists and technicians worked frantically at advanced consoles. "My God," whispered Sarah. "What is this?" Before they could process the scene, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. "Ah, Sergeant Miller, I see you've finally reached us." Jack turned, shocked to recognize the figure emerging from the shadows. "Dr. Weber, but how?" The German scientist smiled, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Did you really think I would reveal everything in court? That was just the beginning, my dear Jack." Shadow began to growl, his fur bristling. Jack could feel the distrust and anger emanating from the dog. "What's going on here, Weber?" demanded Jack, his hand instinctively going to the holster at his side. Weber made a broad gesture, encompassing the entire chamber. "This, my friends, is the future of humanity, a device capable of controlling Earth's tectonic movements." Sarah stepped forward, her weapon pointed at Weber. "You're insane? This could cause destruction on a global scale." "Or," replied Weber calmly, "it could prevent natural disasters, create new arable lands, solve overpopulation problems, the power to shape the very planet." Jack felt a wave of nausea as he comprehended the magnitude of what was before them. "Who's behind this? It can't be just you." Weber laughed. "Oh, Jack, you have no idea how deep this rabbit hole goes. Governments, corporations, powerful individuals, all have an interest in controlling Earth's future." At that moment, a tremor shook the chamber. Scientists ran to their consoles, shouting data and adjusting controls. "What's happening?" shouted Sarah, struggling to maintain her balance. Weber frowned, running to one of the main consoles. "Impossible. The system shouldn't be active now." Jack closed his eyes, concentrating intensely on his connection with Shadow. Through the dog's heightened senses, he could feel something more, something that the instruments weren't detecting. "It's not your system," said Jack, his voice laden with urgency. "It's the Earth. It's reacting." Weber looked at Jack, a mixture of fascination and fear in his eyes. "How can you know this?" "Shadow," replied Jack simply. "He can feel it. And through him, I can too." Another tremor, stronger this time, shook the structure. Cracks began to form in the walls of the chamber. "We need to shut everything down," shouted Sarah. "Now!" Weber hesitated, looking at the pulsating crystal and then at his years of work about to crumble. "I can't just—" Jack advanced, grabbing Weber by the collar. "Listen, Doctor. Whatever you thought you were doing, it went wrong. If we don't shut this down now, we'll all die down here." Weber's gaze met Shadow's, who was staring at him with an almost supernatural intensity. At that moment, the scientist seemed to understand something that went beyond his science and ambition. "All right," Weber finally yielded. "I'll initiate the shutdown protocol." While Weber and his team worked frantically to deactivate the device, Jack, Sarah, and Shadow moved through the chamber, assisting in the evacuation of scientists and technicians. The crystal in the center of the room began to pulse more rapidly, its bluish light intensifying with each second. Jack could feel, through Shadow, that something catastrophic was about to happen. "It won't be fast enough," murmured Jack. He turned to Sarah. "Take everyone you can and get out of here. Shadow and I will try to buy more time." "What? No!" protested Sarah. "I won't leave you here." Jack smiled sadly. "It's not a choice, Lieutenant. It's an order." Reluctantly, Sarah nodded and began to lead the evacuation. Jack turned to Shadow, kneeling beside the dog. "Okay, partner," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "One last mission together. Let's save the world. How about that?" Shadow barked once, his eyes fixed on Jack's. At that moment, the connection between them was stronger than ever. Together, man and dog advanced toward the pulsating crystal, ready to face the unknown and perhaps make the ultimate sacrifice to save countless lives. The fate of the world hung by a thread, and at the center of it all was the incredible partnership between an ex-soldier and his faithful canine companion, united by a bond that transcended human understanding. The air in the chamber was charged with static electricity, bluish sparks dancing around the giant crystal. Jack and Shadow approached cautiously, their bodies tensed by the palpable energy emanating from the structure. "What do we do now?" murmured Jack, more to himself than to Shadow. As if in response, Shadow barked softly and touched his muzzle to Jack's hand. Instantly, a wave of sensations and images flooded the ex-soldier's mind. It was as if he could see the flow of energy inside the crystal, the seismic currents flowing through the Earth's crust, all interconnected in a complex web. "It's incredible," said Weber, who had remained behind, observing them with fascination. "Your connection. It's exactly what we were trying to achieve with our technology, a perfect attunement with Earth's rhythms." Jack barely heard him, focused on the torrent of information flowing through his connection with Shadow. "The crystal," he said slowly, "isn't causing the tremors. It's trying to stabilize them." Weber blinked, surprised. "But how?" "Your device," explained Jack, the words coming to him as if dictated by an external source, "is in resonance with Earth's natural frequencies. But something is wrong. It's as if the Earth were reacting to a threat." At that moment, another tremor shook the chamber, more violent than the previous ones. Pieces of the ceiling began to collapse around them. "We need to do something," shouted Weber, running to one of the still-functioning consoles. Jack closed his eyes, allowing himself to be guided completely by his connection with Shadow. Through the dog's senses, he could perceive something that the instruments weren't capturing, a point of imbalance like a knot in a vibrating string. "There!" exclaimed Jack, pointing to a specific sector of the crystal. "It's that point causing the misalignment," Weber typed frantically at his console. "I see it. There's an energy anomaly in that sector, but I can't correct it remotely." Jack looked at Shadow, a silent understanding passing between them. "We can do this," he said calmly. "What? How?" asked Weber, incredulous. Without answering, Jack advanced, with Shadow toward the crystal. As they approached, the energy around them intensified, making Shadow's fur stand on end and Jack's exoskeleton hiss and spark. "Jack, stop!" shouted Weber. "The radiation at that point is lethal." But Jack didn't stop. With one hand on Shadow's head and the other extended toward the crystal, he closed his eyes and concentrated. At that moment, it was as if man and dog merged into a single consciousness attuned to the very beatings of the planet. A beam of bluish energy extended from Jack's hand to the critical point of the crystal. Shadow barked, a deep and reverberating sound that seemed to echo through the earth itself. The entire chamber trembled, not with the violence of the previous shocks, but with a harmonic vibration, as if everything were realigning. Weber watched, mouth agape, as the data on his console showed a rapid and inexplicable stabilization of all seismic parameters. For several minutes that seemed like an eternity, Jack and Shadow remained connected to the crystal, their bodies glowing with a bluish aura. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything ceased. The crystal stopped pulsing, the tremors stopped, and a deep silence fell over the chamber. Jack staggered backward, exhausted, leaning on Shadow to stay on his feet. The dog, although also appearing tired, remained firm, supporting his partner. Weber ran to them, his face a mixture of amazement and admiration. You did it, but how?" Jack smiled weakly, stroking Shadow's head. "It wasn't us, Doctor, it was the Earth. We just listened." At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the chamber. Sarah appeared, leading a rescue team. Her face lit up with relief upon seeing Jack and Shadow alive. "The tremors have stopped throughout the region," she exclaimed. "What happened here?" Jack exchanged a knowing look with Shadow before responding. "Let's say we learned an important lesson about working with nature, not against it." As the rescue team began to secure the area and attend to the injured, Jack knelt beside Shadow, hugging the dog tightly. Silent tears streamed down his face, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a deep understanding of the unique bond they shared. Weber, observing the scene, seemed to have aged years in a matter of minutes. "I was so obsessed with controlling nature's forces," he murmured, "that I forgot to listen to it. You two taught me more in a few minutes than I learned in decades of research." Sarah approached, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder. "It's time to go. There's much to be explained and decided up there." Jack nodded, rising with Shadow's help. As they walked toward the exit, he knew that nothing would be the same as before. The world had changed, and with it, his understanding of the special bond he shared with Shadow. As they climbed back to the surface, leaving behind the underground complex, Jack reflected on the incredible journey they had lived. What had begun as a struggle to keep Shadow by his side had transformed into an adventure that had saved countless lives, and possibly the planet itself. The future was uncertain, but of one thing Jack was certain. As long as he had Shadow by his side, there would be no challenge too great to face. 3 months had passed since the dramatic events in the depths of the Earth. The world outside continued spinning, unaware of the danger that had almost destroyed it. For Jack and Shadow, however, each day brought a new understanding of the profound bond they shared and the role they now played. It was a sunny morning when Jack guided his wheelchair through the gardens of the newly inaugurated Center for Seismic Studies and Interspecies Communication. Shadow faithfully trotted at his side, his fur gleaming under the sunlight. The complex, built over the ruins of the old underground laboratory, was a testimony to the paradigm shift the scientific world had experienced. "Sergeant Miller!" called a familiar voice. It was Dr. Emily Parker, waving animatedly as she approached. "The results of the latest tests have arrived. They're simply extraordinary." Jack smiled, stroking Shadow's head. "Let me guess, Doctor. Shadow predicted another minor tremor even before your instruments detected it." Emily nodded, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Not just that. The precision of location and intensity is improving every day. It's as if he were in tune with the planet itself, completed Jack, exchanging a knowing look with Shadow. Since the incident, Jack and Shadow had become the center of a revolutionary study. Scientists from around the world came to observe and try to understand the unique connection between the ex-soldier and his dog, a bond that transcended current scientific understanding. As they walked through the corridors of the center, Jack reflected on how his life had changed. What was once a struggle to keep Shadow by his side had transformed into a global mission of protection and understanding of the planet. "Jack!" called another familiar voice. It was Sarah, now Captain Brooks, leading the center's security team. "We have a video conference with the UN Security Council in 10 minutes. They want an update on the early warning system." Jack nodded, heading to the conference room. Shadow, as always, followed closely. As they entered the room, they found Dr. Weber already preparing the presentation. The German scientist had undergone a profound transformation since the events in the underground chamber. Abandoning his ambitions to control nature's forces, he now dedicated his life to studying and respecting the natural rhythms of the planet. "Ah, Jack, Shadow," Weber greeted them warmly. "You've arrived just in time. I was just reviewing the data from our latest prediction." The room's screen lit up, showing the serious faces of world leaders. Jack took a deep breath, still not entirely accustomed to being the center of attention in matters of such global importance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, with Shadow sitting attentively by his side. "In the last 3 months, thanks to Shadow's incredible ability and our unique connection, we have been able to predict and mitigate the effects of 17 significant seismic events worldwide." A murmur of approval ran through the virtual assembly. Jack continued, detailing how the combination of Shadow's sensitivity with the technology developed by the center's team was revolutionizing the way the world dealt with natural disasters. As he spoke, Jack felt a wave of pride and gratitude. He looked at Shadow, who was staring at him with those intelligent and loyal eyes, and smiled. Who could have imagined that the transfer hearing so many months ago would lead them to this moment? After the conference, Jack and Shadow went out to the center's veranda, watching the sunset. Sarah and Weber joined them, each carrying a glass of champagne. "A toast," proposed Sarah, raising her glass, "to a partnership that saved the world. And that continues to protect it every day," added Weber. Jack smiled, raising his own glass. Shadow barked softly, as if also participating in the toast. "You know," said Jack, looking at the horizon, "when I was injured in combat, I thought my days of making a difference were over. But Shadow showed me that there's always a new purpose, a new mission." He bent down, hugging the dog tightly. "Thank you, partner," he whispered, "for everything." As the sun descended on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Jack reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. From a military courtroom to saviors of the world, he and Shadow had proved that the bond between humans and animals could be more powerful and profound than anyone could imagine. The future still held many challenges, but Jack knew that, with Shadow by his side, there was nothing they couldn't face. Together they had found not only each other, but also a new purpose, a new way to serve and protect. As the first stars began to dot the night sky, Jack smiled at Shadow. "Ready for another adventure, partner?" Shadow barked cheerfully, wagging his tail, and so side by side man and dog prepared to face whatever the future held for them, united by a bond forged in the depths of the earth and in the heights of the human spirit. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Jack and Shadow's journey has touched your hearts and inspired your minds. To continue exploring fascinating stories about extraordinary connections between humans and animals, we've prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking on the link to the left. If this story moved you as much as it moved us in telling it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the wonders and mysteries of life. Share your own stories of special connections with animals in the comments below. Who knows, Your story might be the inspiration for our next great adventure. Until next time, and remember, sometimes our greatest heroes have 4 paws and a heart of gold.